Life never really stopped, let alone slow down, but that's how I liked it. Constantly busy and trying to do as many things and take as many opportunities as I could. On this day, however, it ended in a way I would have never imagined. My day, on what was supposed to be an average Wednesday, would change my life as well as everyone else's around me forever. On January 7th, 2015, Connor took his own life. That's how my average supposed to be Wednesday ended. My world came crashing down, and my life that I thought was pretty normal and great ended that night. I'll never forget the blood-curdling screaming and crying from my mom and the sound of my dad calling family members. I'll never forget our best family friend bursting through the front door to hug my mom, and I'll never forget having my house filled with family and friends for the week leading up to his funeral. I'll never forget how hard and scary it was to fall asleep at night, because that's when it happened, when I was asleep. But for the entire time that my house was filled with people, I had felt like I was slowly drowning underwater, unable to properly hear conversations, unable to breathe or think, or even have a minute to myself to process what had happened. I remember a family friend offering to go to Sobeys to get more food and drinks for everyone, and I jumped at the opportunity to get out of the house. And when I walked into the cold air, it just took my breath away, because I hadn't been able to breathe. On the most tragic and traumatic night of my life, however, I remember the hugs and the faces of the people who showed up in the middle of the night to support us and be there. I remember sitting on my bed with my two most incredible role models, Miss Cryer and Miss McLeod, and crying and telling them that I didn't know what to do or how to tell my friends. The week leading up to his funeral was filled with tears, so many tears. It was also filled with laughter and food that was brought from so many other people. It was filled with reminiscing, which is what I find myself doing a lot these days, and it was also filled with support, kindness, and endless helping hands. As you could imagine, anniversaries and holidays are the hardest. I wonder what he would have wanted for Christmas or what he would have done for his birthday. I wonder whether or not he'd still be living at home or off on his own working a job he loved. One of the hardest days since January 7th, 2015 was my 20th birthday. I spent the entire day thinking about how after this, I would have spent more time on Earth than him, and yet I felt like I still had so much to do and see and was nowhere near thinking that I was near the end of my life, which is the complete opposite of how Connor must have felt. Unfortunately, I'll never have answers to questions or even have an answer as to why he felt like his life wasn't worth it. Connor suffered in silence. Up until the day we lost Connor, I had my whole life planned out. I was packed for trips 2 weeks before we left. I knew how I was going to get to and from parties or concerts or whatever before the plans were even set in stone, and I certainly knew exactly what my schedule for a day was far in advance. I like to know what to expect and be prepared for absolutely everything. For the first time in my life, I had no clue what to do with myself or what to say, which, if you know me, never happens. I'd like to say that I handled everything as best as I could, but the truth is, after Connor's funeral, I ignored it. I ignored everything, and I didn't pay attention to how I was feeling, and I sure as hell wasn't aware that I was dealing with trauma. I missed a month of school because, hear me out, it was the beginning of January, we were a few weeks out from exams, and in my mind, I thought, if I go back to school, people are going to stare and ask questions. So I avoided it. I disappeared from school and from my friends and just stayed home. When the new semester started, I decided it was safe for me to go back because everyone would be distracted by new classes, catching up with friends, and everything else of the new semester. Wrong. Turns out I was more than wrong. I wasn't ready to be in a classroom, and second of all, people actually still cared about how I felt and wanted to make sure I was okay. But that was my problem. When people asked questions, I got mad because I didn't want to talk about it, and when they ignored it and let me be, I got mad because why didn't they care about how I was feeling or what had happened? It was me against my own mind. How ironic. I thought I was holding it together pretty well, up until the day I showed up to my English class, and my friend Ethan was wearing the same shirt I got Connor for Christmas that year. I couldn't focus on anything else but that shirt. English finally ended, and I was on my way to exercise science, and as I was about to walk in, I saw Ethan sitting there again. It was like I couldn't escape, and I started to panic. Everything around me started spinning, and I couldn't force any words out. I ran downstairs to find Miss Cryer because I trust her with my life and I knew she'd know exactly what to say to help me pull it together. As I was running up to the library, I could see through the windows that she wasn't there. The panic continued and only got worse. I couldn't breathe and desperately needed to find her. Not the same desperation as when I'd find her just to get out of class. I ran into guidance and they immediately knew who I needed. I sat in an empty room and couldn't stop crying. I couldn't catch my breath and I still couldn't string together a sentence. When Miss Cryer finally came in, the first thing she said was, "Well, it's about time," as if everyone was just waiting for me to let it all out. It made me realize that I had been holding it together to be strong for everyone else, but I hadn't taken 30 seconds to think about how I was doing or feeling. I laughed when she said that. I laughed for the first time in forever. I didn't know how I was going to address my thoughts or feelings, but it was at this moment that I knew that I needed to for my own well-being. It was also that day that I learned what a trigger was. Who would have thought that a shirt on clearance from American Eagle would send me into a panic with hysterical and uncontrollable tears? The tragedy didn't end there, though. That May, my uncle died in a motorcycle accident, and it felt like it couldn't get any worse at that point. Right before I graduated, my dad was diagnosed with chronic leukemia. My life will never be the same, and it certainly will never go back to normal. But it's been 4.5 years, and I can say that it's gotten a little bit easier. One of my life goals was to get to Australia, which is actually inspired by my 6th grade teacher, who actually happens to be here tonight. Greg always incorporated something to do with Australia and where he was from into anything he could, and I knew that someday I needed to go there. By grade 11, I had a plan, as I always did. I was going to take a gap year after high school and work as an au pair in Australia. However, everyone I knew automatically assumed I would cancel everything that happened after Connor passed away. That was funny. It's actually the only thing I had to look forward to after graduating high school. I was going, and no one could stop me. Turns out it was the best thing I'd ever done for myself. I learned how to be independent and how to be on my own and be okay with doing things alone, even though I did make plenty of friends along the way. When I came back, I felt like a new person who was ready to take on life with everything that had happened with a new attitude and perspective. One day I was sitting in one of my first-year classes at Laurier and had an idea. I didn't know how I was going to make it happen or how it could possibly be done while I was away at school, but I knew I was going to. Similar to Australia, when I get an idea in my head, it's there until I follow through. I knew I was meant to do something good with all of the tragedy I'd been faced with the year prior. I decided it would be a baseball tournament, which was Connor's favorite sport, and he had played it since he could walk. In memory of him, and to raise money for youth mental health in our community. It would be called Playing for Connor. It'd be filled with baseball, live music, a silent auction, and a tribute at the end to people we've lost by tying notes to balloons and letting them go. I didn't know where to start, but I slowly did, and it all started coming together, and I knew it was the right thing to do. This weekend will be the 3rd annual Playing for Connor, and so far, we've raised over $16,000 for the RVH Youth Mental Health Inpatient Ward and mental health initiatives at Nottawasaga Pines Secondary School. I'm so thankful that I belong to a community who recognizes the importance of the conversation of mental health and being so supportive of Playing for Connor because of the influence it has on local youth. Since January 7th, 2015, there's been nothing more important to me than finding a voice for those who are too scared or unable to have one, for helping them get the support they need and make sure that the youth in our community know that there is always an answer and always a way out. There's always help available, and we are all in this together. I've also learned to take something good out of every bad situation or circumstance, and Playing for Connor has been that for me in losing him. There's always room for improvement, and there's always more work to be done and more awareness to be brought to something that affects us all. My life has become a whirlwind of something I could have never imagined or planned for, but this is what I've been given, and the only thing I can do is make the most out of it. Through all of this, I've learned to love unconditionally and recognize that every single day we get to live and breathe our beautiful lives is one more day than someone who left us too soon. I've learned to enjoy the small things like a beautiful sunset and the smell of a campfire, but above all, I've learned that life is too short to let your voice go to waste and that there are so many people who so badly wish that they could speak up and reach for help. So I try my best to be that person for them, to find them a voice, and if times are too tough, to be that voice for them. Please, if you can, reach out and tell someone you love them just because. Hug your loved ones a little tighter tonight and cherish every single moment you get with them because you never know when it will be your last.